Hi, everyone, and welcome to Schema Live. We've got a lot of exciting things to show you today, but before we dive in, I wanted to go over just a couple housekeeping items. Because you're a part of a larger audience, we've disabled the chat function. However, we will have some time near the end of the webinar for Q&A, so feel free to enter your questions and we'll do our best to get to them. Next, I'd like to introduce our two presenters. Starting things off will be Marty Rosemaneth. He is Schema's co-founder and chief technology officer. And we also have Steve Burry, who is Schema's executive vice president of customer success. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away, Marty.
Thanks, Shane. Well, welcome everybody to this Schema Live introduction for Schema 2025. Steve and I are going to walk you through a brisk agenda trying to cover Schema 2025. Well, first, since this webinar is going to be available on demand for at least several weeks, if not months, we're going to give a brief, say, 4-slide overview of what Schema is, because we might have new people looking at this who've never heard of Schema or know what it does. So we'll tell you what it is, what it does, and then we're going to dive into Schema 2025, give you a tour of the big idea, and then we're going to jump into a hotel project where we go through the workflow step by step, so that we show you how Schema can be used in this new incarnation as part of a tool chain that combines Rhino, Schema, and Revit into a pipeline for doing an architectural project. So with that, I'm going to intro Schema for you, and then I'll hand it over to Steve, who's going to be doing some of the demos. So first off, Schema is web-based software. There's nothing to install. It has a data-driven workflow, so it doesn't save any files. It's all up in the cloud. It doesn't have any file formats. Now, it does export to Revit, and it does that natively through Revit API. And you will end up with a Revit file when you save that from Revit, but Revit's the one writing the data. So that data-driven workflow exists between all the tools that Schema talks to. It's easy to use and learn. We've made it even easier to use and learn, so we're going to show you that. One of the things about it is it has these web service integrations out of the box. The first one was SketchUp. We've just introduced Rhino. We've got a number of other ones. Well, the first one was Revit, obviously, but we've been introducing these and calling this the Swiss Army knife idea, that we're not trying to build a platform. We're trying to build something that can connect tools together the way that tools are connected into a tool chain in the movie and gaming industry. So we're going to show you that in the demonstration around the hotel. Other thing to note is that we don't have technical dependencies on a big CAD or BIM vendor. So we've written the whole code base, so nobody's going to yank our license or turn us off anytime soon. And what we've done by implementing the Swiss Army knife idea is make Schema as an embeddable extension to other software. So the first one we showed last November at the Trimble event was SketchUp. And today we're going to be showing you Rhino and how to sync live data between Rhino and Schema, and then use that data to do block and stack inside Schema to develop a project. So the big idea behind Schema it doesn't really come from the book, but it's a embodiment of this notion that was described in Refabricating Architecture, that rather than organize a project with individual functional things like wall, door, window, you can have prefabricated assemblies. And so this is the way that we think about the relationship between Schema and BIM. So in a BIM tool like Revit or other BIM tools, you will be entering your points, picking points with a mouse, and as you pick those points, the BIM tool will create objects, walls, doors, windows, furniture, fixtures, all kinds of things. And then the data about what that object is, what kind of materials it contains, all of that, what we call metadata, will be stored in the object. And a BIM tool like Revit makes a database that's full of objects that have metadata in them. Schema doesn't start there. Schema starts by taking what you produce in the BIM tool, and we will look at a previous project and say, what's an interesting assembly that we might want to be able to reuse, and how can we take that assembly that was done in one project and make it flexible, stretchable, and what we call morphable, so that it can be used in future situations much more easily, so that you don't have to start a new project from scratch. One of the things we do in Schema that we'll be showing you in the hotel project is that we develop what's called a catalog. And we use a process that most people will call curation. So we'll look at, if you're going to be doing this in a healthcare studio or a hospitality studio, we'll ask you for 3 or 4 projects and help you put together your first catalog so that you have something to work with inside Schema, so that you can start resolving a project with what we call the puzzle pieces that make up a Schema catalog. And again, we'll walk you through all that. And then the big rule in Schema is whatever you can do in the Schema web app will turn into valid native Revit project data that respects your office standards. So it's not like you're doing something in a conceptual tool and then a whole team needs to enter all that by hand in Revit. That's the whole point, is that rather than take months to re-enter the data in Revit, we can produce that in a matter of minutes from the schema model that's made. And we have a bunch of specifics around that, which make us different than some of the other web-based design tools out there, which we'll probably get into as we talk about Schema's approach. And this is the main thing that makes us different. We're not a throwaway conceptual feasibility tool. Because we can productize the BIM inputs by looking at the previous projects, we can produce complete BIM output at high fidelity and accuracy. We're not just using a mapping table where we've made a bunch of placeholder walls and placeholder doors, and then we say, okay, we're going to turn it into Revit data. Let's look up a Revit family and replace our placeholder wall with a Revit family. We're looking at the way you did it in a project that you've already built. And so the system families for exterior walls and all of the things that make a very complete Revit model usable are what we then reproduce when we write it out. And that means we leverage your office standards that have been embedded in the models that we input into Schema. And that's really important because then when we output the Revit data, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time fixing it, because we output it the way that your team outputted in the previous project. And usually you've got some pretty good standards in there. And if you don't, that's part of where the curation of the catalog helps fix the data before we put it in the catalog, so we solve the garbage in, garbage out problem before it ever becomes a problem. All right, so with that, we're going to talk about Schema 2025. The 4 big things that you'll notice if you've been an existing Schema user is that we've overhauled the interface and made it easier to use, particularly in 3D modeling, and then the bells and whistles that you need to be much more efficient at modeling. Things like the grids, being able to rotate a grid, and when you switch between 2D and 3D, having it, behave the way you want. Being able to define a project location after you start a project as opposed to before you can model the mass. There's a whole bunch of ease of use improvements and ease of learning improvements that we've made. But the main thing about the user interface overall is because we turned it into this embeddable extension to other pieces of software like SketchUp and Rhino. So then the next big thing we're going to show you is the Rhino import and sync, so that you can live sync between Schema and Rhino bi-directionally as you're working on a project. So that's what we mean by the tool chain. We've re-architected the automatic layout, and we focused it on this concept of circulation-driven layout, and we'll be showing you that. And then the workflow improvements, particularly in morphing, that help support this new automated layout that's far more convenient. So with that, I'm gonna throw it over to Steve. He's gonna do a walk through the interface and a quick automatic layout demo to just give you the big idea, and then we'll dive into the deeper hotel project.
All right. Can you see my screen, Marty?
I can.
Excellent. All right. So, like Marty said, this is Schema, web-based, nothing to download, nothing to install from a Schema perspective itself. For those of you who've used Schema in the past, this will look familiar. So this is our main dashboard. We give you the ability to create folders to organize your projects, and then the ability to see everybody's projects. On the left here, we have a bunch of tools. You can be part of more than one instance, so you can select what instance you want to be a part of. So that's especially helpful for maybe consultants that might be working with multiple firms in Schema. Marty mentioned design catalog. This tool is only available to administrators, and this is where the uploaded data from your BIM data gets stored and maintained. You have the ability to test it before it's published, publish it out, create different types of catalogs for different types of situations. So that's available in there, again, only for administrators. And then we have a settings capability as well. This allows you to control your team. So your teams can be anywhere from a couple people to a few hundred people, depending on what you've got. They all live in the same instance. They all work in the same instance. And this is where you have full control over who's gets access to it. Obviously, we've got a couple other things here as well. We have some demo projects that we provide you. These are read-only. You can mark favorites, and you can, download the plugins that we've made available as part of the tool chain. Once you're in a project, those of you who've used Schema in the past, this is where things have changed a little bit, and this is part of the Schema 2025 rollout. We've reorganized things to be a much flatter layout than we had before, and the tools are a little bit more seamlessly organized. So we used to have a whole bunch of toolbars up top. Right now, we've got the ability for you to create massing. That's one of the primary functions of Schema, is to kind of organize a mass and then block and stack within that mass. You can go into floor plans for individual floor plans within that mass. And then we also have real-time metrics that we're keeping track of the entire time. You can identify locations. So we use OpenStreetMaps as our underlay, and you can identify the exact location where you're going to be working. It brings in surrounding buildings. I'll show you all this in a bit. And then you define your construction site as well. Those tools are available here. And you can turn all these things on and off and interrogate them over here under layers. And within a project, so if you have multiple options that you're going to be exploring, you don't have to make 4 or 5 different projects. You can make a single project for that project, and they can make multiple options within the project that different people can be working on, or you can explore different options in. So that's kind of that left toolbar. Up top, we've got the ability to control whether you're looking in a 2D or a 3D orientation, perspective, or orthographic. Down here, we have some floating toolbars around True North and Project North. So some concepts there that people really were asking for from previous usage. And then our main tools are right down here in the bottom. They used to be up across the top toolbar, but we've embedded them in the main area. And really, it allows you to, quickly and easily lay out basically any shape you want at any height you want. And then when you select on various elements, other context-sensitive tools become available to you. At the same time, over on the right here, context-sensitive toolbar comes up, allows you to change parameters, change different values, things of that nature. So you can have, floor counts in different blocks change, the floor height can change, the elevation of the entire block can change. So really trying to flatten the user interface, make sure tools are accessible, and make a lot more sense. So we got some great feedback over the past year that all went into this. Kind of the final thing I want to show you on this is this question mark in the lower right-hand corner. This is our support tool. This is something my team and I communicate with our customers through. So they can send us messages. My team is available for live chat through the system. We have a full knowledge base. So everything within the system is documented, soup to nuts. We have text-based, image-based, and at the bottom of many of the knowledge-based articles are videos. And we also have live product walkthroughs in this task area. Right now we have 8, soon to be 9 tasks. It takes you about 25 minutes to run through them all, but they're click by click through the product, really give you a real strong foundational learning of the tools and some of the smaller nuances that make Schema unique. So that's the UI. Did I miss anything, Marty?
I think you got it all, Steve.
All right, so I'll kick it back to you.
All right, so as we said, we have these 4 things, and this has helped us over the last year to transform Schema from the way we originally described it, which was a BIM knowledge reuse engine, which it still is. But when we provided this diagram, you could see the context, the massing, the simulation, the block and stack. These were all in our own web tool. And as we talked to customers, they said, well, are you going to be able to do all the massing that SketchUp can do? Are you going to be able to do all the surfacing that Rhino can do? And we said, just philosophically, it's not really a good idea for us to try and reinvent every piece of 3D software in the world in our own web interface. So what else can we do? And we decided that we would make this an embeddable extension that could live sync data with other apps to form a tool chain. And so we've turned it from just the concept of a knowledge reuse engine to an architectural tool chain. So by turning the block and stack and schema into a mediator between existing tools in the architectural workflow, what we like to say is that we've created the first architectural Swiss Army knife, because you can start your project wherever you want and then invoke Schema as a live plugin to that piece of software and sync data back and forth, leveraging the block and stack and schema. And so we're going to show you a quick example of that block and stack. And of course, anything we do in Schema then becomes valid native Revit data in Revit or another BIM tool like ArchiCAD or any other thing that you want to take that data to. And so let's jump into that auto layout demo, which is residential. We're going to do two different project types. First, the residential one, and then the longer one is going to be a hospitality project. So with that, I'll kick it back over to you, Steve.
Right, thank you. Entire screen. All right, like Marty said, we're going to start with the residential. This is going to demonstrate our auto layout tool, and then we'll pop into the hospitality. We're going to basically do three things here. We're going to start with the capture and configure BIM content to create the catalog. So we'll create a catalog from one Revit file and push it into Schema. Then we'll open up a project in Schema and pull in data from Rhino. And then we're kind of going to merge the two. I'm going to apply that catalog to the geometry that we pulled into Schema. And then ultimately the output is going to be back into Revit for high fidelity and accurate 3D model. So let me pop into my instance here. All right, and let me pop open this project here. So I'm going to start in basically an empty project. Go to 2D view, and we have a tool here to lay out. Basically, you're going to lay out a circulation line and then control how much space on either side of that circulation the building volume should maintain. So let me pop one in here. As you put things in, you have full control of both directional and extent of the item that you're popping in. So go 175 feet in this direction, 175 feet in this direction, and then I'll close it out here. And one thing that previous users will note is that we can close a loop now. So that was something that was not the easiest thing to do before, much easier now. What we end up with here is by default, it starts us with kind of a 5-story building. I can change that. I can drop it to 1. I can bring it up to as many as I want. The floor height for this block, and we'll talk about blocks as opposed to floors and buildings later, is 11 feet. And then the circulation width is 6 feet on this one. So that's the default, ultimately changeable. There's no issues in changing that. The other thing I can do is say, all right, each one of these, I want to make a, wrong side again. I want to make some of these just single loaded, so I can control the depth on either side of my circulation. Can bring it right down to 0 for single loaded, or if you have units on one side that are going to be larger than others, I can go 30 feet and 40 feet, 15 feet, whatever I want to do here. So we're going to make this big kind of open space in the middle. And then I have the ability, and I'll show you how to do this in a bit, but I have the ability now to apply a catalog to this particular building. So let's see, I'm going to apply this Schema residential catalog. And the first thing it's going to do is kind of apply it really quickly. This is our kind of the first distribution that it makes. And what you're going to notice is that it initially distributes all the unit types kind of equally across the whole thing. That may or may not be great. We have the ability to control this. The other thing I want to point out is that just because I've finished kind of an initial layout doesn't mean I'm done here. So I could put another 175-foot wing on this side. Now it'll temporarily remove the geometry when I do that. And each new segment is going to be double loaded, so I can remove the loading. Let me pop one over here as well. And then if I want to, I can continue to kind of lay things out. So I have the ability to lay out things pretty dynamically, kind of get any sort of crazy shape I might want in here, kind of preview it, get that down to 0. And then at any point that I want to, I can take a look and see, well, what would the distribution of this one be like? So you can start looking at how much space do I need to fill up the program that I might want to put in place. So this might be too much space. Let me just get rid of a couple of these here, and we'll go back to a more simple one. But the idea behind it is obviously you can change shapes dynamically, tell it to redistribute again, and it will redistribute again as you move through the process. Let me just end up with this shape that we've got here. And I'm going to look at possibly a different distribution for this building. So I can go into it, this unit mix, and edit it. In this case, my catalog included 4 different types of units. Now I can have multiple actual units within each type. But let's say in this case, I only want 15% studios, and I've got 1 studio type. Let's say this is going to be mostly a 1-bedroom layout. So I'm going to say I want to distribute these as much as I can, and I'll use both types. For the 2 bedrooms, I'm going to keep that at 25%. And at the 3 bedrooms, let's just exclude that one, put these at the corner and just say, all right, well, I'm going to need 10% of these. And once you're at 100%, so it's doing the math for you. Once I'm back to 100%, it allows me to distribute that. So if I hit the distribute button here, it's going to do the best it can to do a layout. And it will show me over here, hey, these were your goals. Here's what we actually hit for you. 15, we're at 15.4. The bedroom is straight on, right? The 2 bedrooms we hit exactly as well. And 3 bedrooms, we're at about 7%. So this matched it up pretty nicely. At any point, I can go through and say, well, let's try a different one. I can continue to lay out new, lengthen corridors, put on new wings, shorten, change things. And I can explore different options. So speaking of options, one of the things I can do is at any point, I might like this one, but might want to try consider a different option. One of the things I can do, let me go ahead and save this, is kind of clone this option at this point. Continue to work on this, maybe have a teammate jump in and work on the clone and see what other options there are. But I can go ahead and duplicate this, and it'll give me a duplicate of that option 1 in my list here, and I can start playing with them as we move forward. So you can see I have now this option 1, option 1, option 1. So some pretty interesting opportunities here for you to explore different options and things of that nature. Now, once you are at a point where you've got what you like, let me go ahead and redistribute here again. One of the things you can do is release the building. Our former parlance of this was bake. Now we're calling it release. So until I release it, I can't play with individual units, but once I do release it, I can start going into individual floor layouts and start playing with various functions here. So I could say, all right, I like this unit layout, but obviously I don't want a big gap here, or maybe I do, and I'm going to have another sort of open space. I'm not going to define it here. It's not going to be one of my units. That'll be something that I manage once I get into my BIM system. So in Revit, in this case, that would just be an open space. Maybe over here, I want to do I want to morph this unit though, so I can go ahead and I just detached it from its the rigid space that it was in. And now I can start dynamically changing it and making it fill these spaces. So some pretty cool and interesting stuff available for you here. Let me go ahead and save that, and I will take a quick look what that looks like. Yeah. So kind of the last thing I want to show you on this one is the ability to get a project into Revit. So let me pop open Revit here. I'll go to our Schema plugin. And what this allows me to do is it connects me into my Revit instance, gives me access to all the projects that I've access to, and gives me the ability to open up and import any of the options that I just created. So I'll go ahead and pick option 1 here, hit import. Now this takes a little while, and there are some pop-ups off screen. So what I'm going to do is move that off screen, go ahead and save this file. And it immediately starts crunching through and showing you, you know, what your progress is on this. So let me pull that off screen here, and we'll move to the next spot.
So we'll come back and look at that, right?
Say again?
We'll come back and look at that export after.
Absolutely. Remind me to do that. So the next part I wanted to show really was this hospitality. And this is kind of the shape that we're going to run through, and we're going to pull that in from Rhino. I'm going to block and stack it in Schema, and we'll show you what the output looks like in Revit. So let me go back to we actually start in Revit here. So in Revit, this is where we extract units for our catalogs. Typically, what we've done, like Marty said, is we'll help customers as they're onboarding. We'll interrogate some past projects that they've had, looked at commonality, look at likely units that could be made. We have working with a lot of customers that already have a concept of a catalog. And you know, it matches up really well with what they're trying to do. But in essence, if you know how to make a group in Revit, you know how to make a catalog for Schema. And ultimately what we do is you just get those groups into a file. And then again, you know, once we've got it the way we want it, you kind of go back to this Schema plugin, and we can upload a catalog from Schema.
And one thing we should point out is they don't have to be necessarily room-based. If you are tracking space, you could do things, for instance, with area separation lines. So when we had a data center example, you would have a whole bunch of compute equipment bounded by area separation lines because you didn't have walls in between all the racks in the data center. So there's lots of different ways that you can play with groups in Revit and make valid catalog assemblies in Schema.
So yeah, we've talked to our clients and prospects about what level of detail they want in their catalogs, and it varies from I really just want open spaces with a few elements in it to I want everything in there. So that's going to be more of an art than a science, and we can help you with that. From our perspective, we don't care what's in the group. We'll manage it the way you want it to be managed. So once you've got these groups organized, you can go ahead and create a group. We'll have you, it'll run through the project and look to see what groups are well defined and made in what way. And we'll go through and help define what those units should be in Schema. So this takes just a minute. And then it comes back with a list of those elements that it found in the project. So in this case, the names of the units in Schema are going to match the names of the groups that you create in Revit. So we have a king and a king double attached, double L, king suite, and so on. I can go ahead and create the catalog now. I did that previously. It does take a minute or two to do. So let me just go into Schema now and we can take a look at that. So let me go into the design catalogs. And the one I uploaded was this 2025 hotel catalog. As you can see, it's got the 7 units that I created. We have the ability to assign the unit type. So we call this a king, but I also have unit types in Schema that allow me to say how these things are going to be organized for your metrics that you're keeping track of as you go through. So I can define that. All the spaces and room settings that got brought in are organized. And then we also have the ability for this particular template to define what the default assemblies are going to be for your exterior, for like common walls and corridor walls, for the slabs and for the roofs and things like that. So we give some information as well around the system families that aren't necessarily part of the catalog to help inform and form a really well-structured Revit output. So within the units themselves, it will show you a small level of detail in terms of what are actually in the units. The other thing that's really important is the ability to say, hey, if this thing morphs, I want to make sure that it either holds an exact length. In this case, if you've got a bathroom, you might want to say, look, I want the bathroom not to move at all, so make sure it is always exactly 14.6 by whatever. Or you might have a space that you want to say, yep, I do want this to morph, but maybe you've got certain limits, right? So it shouldn't be any less than 16 and maybe no more than 22. So you have full control over how things morph and in what direction that they morph, or even if they morph. So that's an important aspect. I'm missing anything on that, Marty?
I think you got it all. I would stress that you will have system families that are part of the group that you upload, but generally speaking, because of the workflow issues in Revit around groups, things like demising walls, exterior walls get generated programmatically. That's where those default system family types come into play, and that's how we get around some of the difficulties that these types of projects have in Revit when you're trying to do them natively with groups in Revit.
Cool. All right, so that was the catalog creation part. So that was kind of the first step in this hotel creation thing. The next piece I'm going to do is from Rhino, I'm going to pull in some geometry for a hotel that I'm building. So in this case, like I said, showed in the first part with the UI, I've created a site. So I kind of have this site layout at 20 Arlington Street in Boston. So let me go ahead and activate our Rhino plugin. And I'm going to pull in a piece of geometry from Rhino that I created previously. So this is basically the shape that we wanted to pull in. So this was created by one of our architect friends, as well as the units that we're going to be laying out. One of our architect friends on the West Coast helped us out with this one. So props to him. So thank you for that. So basically, it's super simple. I can push and pull data, receive and send data into and out of Rhino. I can receive construction site data. I can receive buildings. I can receive terrain. So if you do cut and fill in Rhino, you can certainly put that in. And you can push terrain out from Schema, manipulate it in Rhino, and then pull it back into Schema, and that ultimately gets out into Revit. So a lot of workflow back and forth between Rhino and Schema is capable here. Surrounding buildings can also be brought into Rhino. In this case, all I'm going to do is bring in the building initially. So that popped right in because I had that building selected when I pulled it in. I have another cool little feature that got pulled in here. This is just a generic mesh, and we do have the ability to bring those in as part of our capabilities. So interesting little item. But honestly, that's it. It's not any more complicated than that. If you've built it in Rhino and you've organized it, there is a little bit of organization you need to do in Rhino. So basically what we need to do is have the overall massing of the building turned into a block. Kind of that simple. Once that block is available, we bring it into to Schema, and then we move forward from there. Any highlights on that one, Marty?
Yeah, I think a lot of the cheat code and what we've done with previous demos around Rhino is that we'll pick the project location in Schema, and then we'll synchronize the terrain into Rhino and develop the massing in Rhino so that way the origin points are aligned, so that everything so you don't have to move anything around when you're synchronizing data back and forth. So that's just a little hack.
All right. Before I get back into Schema here, one thing I do want to show is that that import was successful.
That's the Revit.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
So this was the building that I created kind of live that came into Revit. So those units all had balconies on them. If I go into one of these levels, really, really well defined. Each one of these groups is, or each unit is a group. You can see, I've got the studio in here a few times, and the behavior of this group is as you would expect it. So for some reason, there's 3 beds in this one studio. So let me get rid of those. And you notice that's here and here and here. And when I update the group, one of the cool things about Revit groups is you update it once and it updates everywhere. We maintain that paradigm as we pull things in from our catalog into groups in Revit. So yeah, real quick output, real solid. Again, it didn't get you to 100%. You wouldn't be able to suddenly print these documents, but it's going to get you to 60, 70, 80% really quickly and get you to a space where you can really jumpstart and get ahead on your project. Any comments on this, Marty?
No, doing great.
All right, cool.
I got the easy part here.
I know. All right. So one of the things we recommend, after you bring in geometry and things like that, if at any point, like I was showing before during the kind of that auto layout, before you kind of bake that building, or what's the new term we use now? I already forgot.
Release?
Before you release a building, make a copy of it in case you want to go backwards.
Yeah, and the reason for this, if we weren't really explicit about it, is because of the layout is controlled by circulation. If you pick up a grip on a hallway and move it, all the units are going to remain attached to that hallway. So yeah, when you don't want them attached to that hallway, that's when you release them so you can do individual things with them.
But if there's a chance you want to go back, absolutely create a new option before you move forward. So in this case, I had made a new massing option, and I'm going to start playing with that. As I mentioned, we have kind of 3 different hierarchies of elements within a structure. We have the overall building that is made up of multiple blocks, and those blocks have 1 or more floors in them. So,
and you're hitting tab to cycle between them. We should make that explicit.
Yeah, I'm using the tab button. Sorry about that. That's all explained in the training, Marty.
Oh yeah, but sure.
All right, so I'm going to go into this floor. And first thing I want to do, I could certainly start laying out just open shapes and things like that. But again, the point of this is for you to kind of merge those catalogs together with your massing here. So where's that building?
It was at the top.
Was it?
Yeah. There you go. It was actually right on your mouse.
Yep. Thank you. So now this brings in that catalog that I brought in, gives me the ability to basically just drag and drop things like this stair block. I know I want a stair over here, maybe this main core I'm going to put over here. And then allows me to just sort of puzzle piece and drop these units in as I want to.
Yeah, so you don't have to use an automatic solver. You can just play with this like it's a Visio diagram. It's just a Visio diagram that makes full Revit 3D models.
So I can lay out things horizontally on a floor. There are certain elements that you know are going to want to be vertically aligned as well. So I have the ability to create what we call layouts, and these layouts can be applied floor over floor. So I'm going to, for this particular unit, this stair unit that I know is going to go down through the bottom, I'm going to create a new layout and call it stair. And tell Schema, look, I want this thing exactly where it is, top to bottom, right down through floor one, right? I'm not going to include it in the penthouse because there's no penthouse above this particular unit. But I could apply that to this one where I can say, all right, well, I want a new variant here. Well, let's call this one core. And this one is going to go both up and down throughout my entire building. So really, really quickly able to lay out vertical and horizontal layouts and really use those as placeholders as you're developing out the floors. So let me go back into and lay out a couple more units.
And so if you had multiple elevator lobbies and elevator shafts that were only serving certain floors, this is the way that you would control that as well. And if you happen to pick up an elevator and move it over, it's going to make sure that it's vertically aligned on all the floors.
All right. So now I can start laying out units. There's some cool things I can do with them. So if I've got a few in a row, I can clone them. I can mirror units, and these behave much, much more nicely and easily and quickly than you would do mirroring a group. The other thing I want to point out is, although it appears as though we've got overlapping walls that are going to happen here, as part of our export, we manage that. So you only have one partition wall between these two units, unless it's modular, in which case we tell you to organize the group a little bit differently in Schema, and then you would have two adjoining half walls that would adjoin together. So either option is capable with Schema. But when I learned that we didn't overlap walls and groups, that sold it for me. All right, let me keep laying a few of these units out. Right, can drop some double units in here. Rotating, mirroring is super simple. So these are for well-defined spaces, right? Orthogonal spaces. I've got some spaces down here, and maybe I want to have a couple of kings down up against this this rounded shape. So I can clone the unit here, flip them, kind of drop them back into space, and now I can actually, what we do is we will detach it from the base unit, which will instantly make a kind of a copy of it. But now I have full control over these drag points, and I can start manipulating this and dynamically updating the units, and they dynamically update the morphed units themselves, right? So this area over here, this master or king size bathroom over here, I said, do not move. I've got this well defined. If we're going to morph anything, it's going to be around, this living space that I've got. So whole bunch of different options here. And you can see you can start quickly laying out and puzzle piecing entire sets of layouts. So rather than boring,
Morphing used to be like a command that you would have to do, and now it's just really just an endpoint drag, and it realizes that's what you're trying to do. So same result, just a lot faster and easier.
Show you real quick as well. Maybe some of these rooms are of typical layout for the top few floors. I can make them part of this layout and start quickly laying them out. So again, vertical, horizontal, blocking, stacking, auto layouts, all capable now. Let's see.
One piece of color commentary I'll give there is that if you've been a previous Schema user and you were used to doing, a generator and then puzzle piecing on a floor plate and then using that as a template, the previous limitation was you could only use an entire floor plate as a template. What we've done here with this ability to control things vertically is we've effectively made it so you don't have to use an entire floor as a template. You can just make a part of a floor template, like the cores, or a layout where, let's say, in a medical facility, you've got 3 floors of lab space and you need to keep them vertically aligned for medical gases or something like that. You can use this for that as well. So it's the ability to duplicate part of a floor and to have interlocking chunks of floor that work together, and you can manage them as a template, but it's not limited to only whole floors now.
All right, so blocking and stacking, I'm not going to bore you with completing this, so I had created a complete layout ahead of this. Maybe there we go. And one of the things I want to make sure is called out here is the whole time if you don't have anything selected, it's giving you updates on building metrics for the unit mix. So it's going to tell you the percentage and the number of units that are laid out in your unit mix, as well as your area schedule. Now, if I select a portion, like if I select this block, that'll update and say, all right, so for this block, kind of this main hotel area, this is what my distribution looks like. And the whole time, I can also come into this metrics tab and I can create my own kind of pivot tables or spreadsheets. We do come with the default accommodation schedule, so you can kind of look at what the layout is of various things. I can drag and drop different parameters that we're keeping track of the whole time here, and kind of identifying what the count is, or what the area is, or whatever sort of parameter you're looking to control here. So this is giving me in this case, I've grouped it by building, group, or block, and floor. So floor 1's got this layout, floor 2's got this layout, and you can tell exactly how many square feet and exactly how many units are in each one. And if necessary, I can export that out to CVS or CSV or Excel. All right, so kind of the last piece I wanted to show, and I'm not going to do this live because it did take a little while, but I am going to bring up the output that was created when we output that project that I was just showing you into Revit. So you can see, right, all the geometries in there. So each one of these units are grouped accordingly. If I look at one of these levels, you can see it's pretty well laid out, right? So each group, again, each unit is its own group. If I were to change one of those, it would update any place that group was used. That's kind of it. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted me to point out, Marty.
No, great job. I love the shading units that are built into those units. They're really slick. Yeah. On the exterior wall panel system, right? So these aren't just generic placeholder walls, right? This is real architectural stuff for real projects. I hope everybody on the webinar can see that.
All right, so I'll stop share. I think I kick back to you now.
Yep. All right, so mainly we just want to talk about what you can do next. So if you haven't tried Skema lately, we think you should. So, we have a trial. Scan that QR code. It'll get you back into the trial. There's, as we showed you, training in the product that you can walk through in about 25 minutes and be well versed in how to use all the tools in Skema. We do engage customers more deeply than just the self-training. If you want to schedule a workshop with us and ask us questions about how you might get started on a particular type of project, we're not limited to one project type like residential or hospitality. We've been used on lots of different project types. You can see the types of projects up on our website. And I guess the last thing will be that, what we've been getting as feedback when we apply this on projects is the time savings, the design quality, the decrease in the errors, the ability to achieve lots of goals that architects are looking to achieve on their projects on behalf of the owners that are hiring them. So we would just urge you to take a look at Skema and with an open mind, take a look at it and see whether it will benefit your projects. And then if you need any more information, you can find us on our website. You can email us at info@Skema.AI, and you can find us on LinkedIn. And again, if you want to get started, go ahead and scan the QR code. And we do have some time for QA.
Yeah, we got a couple questions here, and kind of going back to your last slide there, Marty. Um, excuse me. So about a part of that first point you had on that last slide, how exactly do you handle data privacy issues? Sorry, I got you right at a cough.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so the way that Schema works is that we only use the AI portions very sparingly as we're doing the curation of the catalog. So we're not like a large language model where we're inputting vast volumes of projects to train a solver. Our solvers are procedural. The main thing about the AI is the input data quality, and that's what we use it for. So besides the fact that we aren't diluting your copyright on the designs and the deliverable outputs, all of the data that we have in a catalog for one particular customer is never shared with another customer. So as we said, the team is in your tenant, and your tenant is walled off data-wise from other tenants. Now, we can make exceptions to that. We've had examples of customers who are working with, for instance, I'm thinking of a technical high school where they recruit interns from, and they said, could you share our catalogs with this technical high school so that those students already know how to use our unit types when we hire them for internships? And we're happy to do that. And that's something that you as an administrator of a Schema tenant control by inviting others to your tenant. So that's the way that we handle the privacy, by not training any AI on the Revit data that we receive, and then by segmenting all the customer data so that none of the customer data is shared with other customers unless you ask us to make it available to people in an ecosystem that you have around a project.
All right, and then we have time for probably about one more before we're at the top of the hour. So, Marty, I'll toss this one to you as well. What role in a firm is best for using Schema?
I mean, our main strength is the block and stack. And that's really where you're trying to fit a program into a building, and you might have massing ideas and you might have urban context ideas that you're trying to figure out whether they're feasible. You can figure out whether they're feasible with Schema, but the nice part about it is you then don't have to throw that feasibility study away. You can actually use that to advance the project once you win the work, and that's the main thing for us. I think part of what we've done with implementing Rhino is now we've made the analysis tools that people might be used to as part of, say, Grasshopper, easily applicable to Schema projects. Things like Ladybug and other analysis tools that you might already be using in your practice are now much easier to apply because of the toolchain idea that we've embedded into Schema and its ability to work with the other existing applications you might be using.
All right, great. So with that, I think it's about time to wrap up. So thank you everybody for joining. If you joined a little late or want to rewatch or want to send this to a colleague, the recording of today's webinar will be sent out to everybody in the next day or two. And as Marty mentioned, we encourage you to hop in and try Schema today. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial on our website, www.Skema.AI. And if you'd like a workshop, please fill out the contact us form on our website or email us at info@Skema.AI. So thank you all again for being here, and have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.